I'm Rachel Conover, and this is Picture the Process, icon-based literacy for task-based learning. Today's agenda is, first I'll introduce you to who I am and the students that I serve, the problem that we believe we're solving for, and how it applies to your students. And we'll go over some implementation tools to help you put these practices into play in your own classroom. The audience analysis piece at the end will be some worksheets that we guide you through that help us to give you your own Picture the Process tools for your classroom. So I am a culinary arts instructor at a CTE school, Indian Valley Vocational Center. It's in Sandwich, Illinois. Yeah, I get the joke. Teaching culinary in a town named Sandwich. It's also where I grew up. I've been there for over 7 years, but in a former life, I was an executive chef in the industry for over 20 years. Here's some images of me with students at our annual Gingerbread House Challenge and doing what I used to do best, just cooking. The students that I now serve come from 10 different districts. They're juniors and seniors in high school with diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, varied learning and culinary experiences, and their learning levels range from sometimes a second grade reader to a person that's in advanced placement classes at their home schools. It means I have to teach on multiple levels, in the classroom and in the lab. I do this primarily through hands-on projects and a classroom business. I strive to provide real-world experiences for students that can cut across any industry, not just culinary. I have a commitment in my classroom to inclusion and bettering my accessibility in terms of the classroom and the kitchen. The culinary space is not typically an accessible space. I'm working on improving that in my own practice. UDL has really helped me in the past year. As I've dug deeper into these principles, it helped me be able to rethink how I was sharing my own materials. Techniques can steer us and our students to a more rewarding learning experience, and UDL helps instructors reimagine how content is taught, allowing students to reach their individual goals. How we teach drives what we teach. That really stuck in my head this year. It was how I was teaching that needed some adjustments. Earlier, we asked you in the reflection question to think about a time when your students were asked to complete a task or understand a concept and written language or verbal communication really failed to help them construct meaning on how they could do what you were asking. For me, this was happening all the time in my culinary lab, specifically with recipes and getting students to understand what I needed them to do without me going over and over the written instructions with them time and time again. This is the problem I want to talk about today, and one that I hope we're taking steps towards solving for. My students tend to be more engaged with visual materials. I bet yours are the same. We discussed how the learners of today are really visual learners. They love videos, images, and icons for everything. This bleeds into our classrooms. Yet the current landscape of educational materials and then culinary recipes for cooking is verbose and non-visual. They are long and cumbersome. They lack universal language, and this does not aid all the different abilities and learning styles that our students bring into the classroom. Here's an excellent example of a recipe that overwhelms me before I can even think about a cupcake, let alone how to bake it. This is a Williams & Sonoma vanilla cupcake recipe. It is text heavy, and even the images are cluttered and don't help us construct meaning on what we're supposed to do. Given a recipe like this, my students will shut down and begin to have anxiety before they can even think about what I want them to do. It's not a tool that helps them construct meaning or to work independently. And that's the goal in the work-based learning setting. for students to be able to work towards that independence, those job skills that they can put into play beyond the classroom. After failing several times this year, I decided I needed to try a different way. My clunky attempt at taking those recipes and turning them into something more visually appealing started here, with large pieces of parchment or wax paper from the kitchen. I would sketch out recipes or steps and try to make it more visually appealing for students. Here you can see a map for cream cheese frosting. I take ingredients and spread them out over the page and made it look like a roadmap with SEL skills like patience embedded along the way to help students remember how they could get to that destination delicious or endpoint. Pizza or pie dough recipes were also sketched out. Here you can see one for pie dough. Mise en place is our culinary organization system, everything in its place. I would then start breaking out equipment, ingredients, and directions towards the end of the recipe, giving students 3 distinctive areas to focus on. My early parchment paper drawings, although very helpful for students, took up a lot of my planning time and were really hard to replicate and copy. Thankfully, my wife is a graphic and app designer, and she let me know there were some digital tools that could aid in this process. We began by using Google Slides and Flaticon. It can be a Google add-on. It has an easy-to-use search bar, so I could look for icons that met the needs of the recipe's ingredients and tools. I was able to begin constructing some simple recipes, and students really liked it. We'd take 5 minutes as a bell ringer. They would color in the ingredients. It helped them prepare their thoughts and begin thinking through the process before we ever went into the kitchen. It was amazing. I saw a difference right away in their executive functioning, the physical space organization, and their ability to retain information and recall it. I didn't have so many of the "Mom, where are my shoes?" questions. That's what I like to call it in the lab when a student says, "Where's the milk? Where's the vanilla?" before they ever looked. "Mom, where are my shoes?" They're right in front of you. You just need to look. I think part of this was they had less anxiety in the lab. They felt more equipped to accomplish goals independently. But again, it still could use some refining. Laura, my wife, began to see this more as an app that we could develop to aid other teachers and students, not just me in my own classroom. What we've come up with is Picture the Process, a 3-part app that helps you design, choose your own ingredients or materials needed, think of tools that students can have collected to aid in their success during their journey or process, and then the process or directions themselves. The teacher can put these together and share them with students, and over time, as this becomes your practice, you can teach your students to then add in tools and the process on their own. It helps them to begin learning and recalling that background information and putting it in a way that doesn't rely on grammar and sentence structure. This doesn't mean those things aren't important, but in task-based and work-based learning, some of these icons help them recall information faster. That's a job skill, and it's one that's crucial for our younger learners to develop. For complex recipes or steps, you can embed more tools and replace some of the language in the process with the icons. We also make sure we have checkboxes for each step. That way, students are constantly thinking through their executive functioning skills. It allows me as an instructor to walk around the classroom and at a glance, see where each and every student is in that process. I don't have to ask or clarify, what have you collected? What do you need to do next? I can see it as long as they're following this checkmark system. It really helps them stay on task, and It allows me to make formative assessments as I walk around the room about student progress. I had started developing these tools originally to help some of my students that have language processing delays and my students on the autism spectrum. But what ended up happening was all of my students began asking for those visual recipes. They preferred it to traditional written language. It also made the classroom more fun. I could switch up the style of icons. If this class is really into anime, that was the style that I gave that recipe for ramen. It was a way to engage them and embed some different learning styles that I just wasn't using on the regular before. The more I used these visual recipes, the more students wanted them. What I had primarily begun to develop as a teaching tool for students with language delays or my students on the autism spectrum really became a tool that benefited all my students. 9 out of 10 kids chose Picture the Process recipes when given the choice between the visual aid or traditional written language. They loved it. They loved coloring it before class. They loved the way it kept them on track in the lab. And I loved it. Created a less stressful environment. I saw improvements in language retention and in executive functioning that I hadn't noticed in all my other years of teaching. This is a video of one of my students using a Picture the Process in the lab. The growth that she showed over a short period of time and her ability to gather ingredients independently was transformative. It really was one of those moments where I realized this could serve so many people other than just me and my students in my classroom. Working on today?
Getting the ingredients for the crust.
So which one did you just point to? What's that?
This is all-purpose flour.
That's the one you're getting? Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Kelsey, do you like this Picture the Process, the pictures?
Yeah.
Why is it easier than if I write it out? What do you think?
Then, because I'm not great with words.
You're not great with words? Yeah. Me either. I like pictures.
It's great.
Let me get a shot of this beautifully colored Picture the Process.
Yeah.
Nice. So for today's activities and session, we've already asked you to envision one lesson or classroom task where your students struggled to access language comprehension this year. I'm now going to ask you to reimagine that area with me and think of student engagement and some areas that might benefit from icon-based language replacement as a UDL technique. As we go through this, please sketch notes of what student success might look like. Make sure you mark potential barriers to learning along the process. My UDL lesson building toolbox is one that I really rely on when I'm beginning to think of creating a Picture of the Process or just looking how I can better visually scaffold a lesson. I start with looking at my objective reflection, then consider my audience before I rebuild that lesson and construct with tech and appropriate tech tools. Like my students, I'm very visual, so I benefit from icons. Here, I've taken Bloom's taxonomy, which used to be really difficult for me to remember, and I paired it with icons. It helps me simplify the language. I know by looking at the create, analyze, or remember with the golden retriever for recall, what I want students to do. This is an example of my planning process for a gingerbread project that we do every year. This time I used icons to help me streamline my thinking and make sure that I was embedding UDL and icon-based language to simplify materials for students. Here you can see in the create area, a gingerbread rubric would be used to assess what I was asking students to create. In analyze, students would give me presentations on what they created so they could analyze and reflect on how they moved through the process. This is just a way for me to streamline thinking so that I can better give students what they need to accomplish goals that they help set. Most of the time, it includes icon-based language, just like the ones I'm showing you here. I'll share these slides so you're welcome to use these frameworks if it helps you. You should always consider your audience when rebuilding. I know this sounds simple, but sometimes it's just a step I forget. So I have to put it there for myself. How do I create interest? If they're into anime, like I referenced earlier, maybe that's a filter I throw on a video I shoot for them, or the way I stylize the icons and recipes. If I'm, for instance, going to teach a cooking class to 5-year-olds for pizza, is this the recipe that I really want to share with them? Probably not. A picture of the process looks a lot more fun, and it's easy to understand, so they can interact with me through the creation process. Here's some pictures of that party with my 5-year-old nephew. You can see that the kids were able to answer questions when I'd ask them, what is this ingredient? Just from looking at the pictures. Even some of them that were so young they didn't know how to read. Overall, it levels the playing field for everyone, no matter what age they are. When kids are young, we know that giving them a picture book with words helps them construct language synthesis. They derive meaning from the pictures to recall the words. Why does this cease to be important or a valuable way to educate when a kid gets to 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th? Why does it become invalidated as a tool for higher education? It's important. It's easy. It's engaging. We should be using it more. Even my classroom calendar, when I let students draw the pictures and put down the information, I no longer had to answer the "what are we doing today?" question when it was on the board. They wanted to look at it. They participated in the creation process. It was more interesting, more engaging. It freed up my time. Considering how you can use these tools, icon-based language, or images in lesson planning, I like to say reduce, reuse, recycle. You don't have to recreate the wheel every time. Make sure you're reducing down your objective until it's clearly distilled and you focus on the aim of each lesson. Start with simple lessons first. Reuse hard and soft skills in multiple lessons back to back so students can build on their successes as well as you. And as students begin to own those skills, ask them to recycle them into new assessments or creation processes that allow them to apply it and see their learning in new ways. Sometimes just that creation process and getting them to draw on background knowledge is a lesson in itself. As students begin to reduce, reuse, recycle in the classroom and it becomes a system or practice, they oftentimes benefit by doing this for themselves. I noticed this year as the practice became our classroom norm, I was then able to start trusting students to participate in building rubrics and creating their own materials. This looked like goal setting and student-driven planning. It's important to set appropriate goals with students so that they're rooted in students' needs and abilities and experiences rather than our own expectations. This means that we're really finding that middle spot where we want students to know and do things at a certain standard, but we're going to have a conversation with them about what do they feel success looks like. They can begin to picture the process of their own success the more we discuss it with them and the more they collaborate in the tools we use to get them to where we want them to be. This is a video of one of my second-year students being able to create his own picture the process recipe and work plan. He didn't use the format that we will be sharing with you today. He used one with Google Slides and flat icons, and this was earlier on in my process. I think it's important to note, though, the core components of simplifying language and using steps in a process can be applied in any classroom setting. This is a student that struggled mightily with spatial and mental organization, but in a second year was able to create an awesome panna cotta with no mistakes and no mess. Austin, hello.
Hi.
Tell me how your recipe is going.
Pretty awesome. Everything's going correctly.
What step are you on right now?
I'm about to pour the mixture into the rain.
Okay. Which step is that over here?
Step 5.
So you're already, what? You're already to step 5?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. All right, you got your mixture. How's the gelatin working out in there?
It melted instantly.
Instantly, okay. Nice shine on it. You got your ramekins there, good. After you've found some lessons or tasks that you would like to recreate in your classroom, you focused in on your objective for your students. You've considered your audience and thought about their needs and potential barriers to learning. We'd ask you to think about how you can reconstruct with tech and tools. You are more than welcome to use visual aids and reduce the amount of written language needed to achieve goals. A simple place to start is embedding a few images or icons. They're the same in any language. They're easy to use, they capture interest, they create links to language synthesis. Flat icon paired with Google Slides is a powerful combination, and it offers easy to use platforms for instructors and students. Flat icon is free. Premium features come with a subscription fee. It has a search bar that can aid and simplify the creation process, and its basic outline can be reused over and over. But our picture the process and how we envision it benefiting education and workplace learning goes beyond what these simple tools can offer. Today, we'd like you to move through these worksheets we've provided you with the notes that you've taken throughout this presentation. We would love to be able to equip you with personalized picture the process materials that you can try out in your classroom. We would work with you over time to tweak them and redesign to make sure that they're serving the needs that you and your students desire. This can be our process, an opportunity to collaborate to see where using icons and image-based language can meet our learners in the world where they live, a visual world. How can we combine that with written language to make sure we envision the future together?